Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be doing another free-to-play champion showcase, and this is the long-awaited Valkyrie video. We're going to be talking about Valkyrie, who I pulled late last year, who for the longest time was #1 on my non-void legendary wish list, and we'll see exactly where she's come into play in terms of use cases on my account. So funnily enough, Valkyrie has one of the simplest skill sets in the entire game. She only has one active ability, and it's the one that she is predominantly known for: the massive shield for 3 turns and the counterattack buff for 2 turns, and of course the shield is proportional to her defense. She's truly one of the OG legendaries in the game and one of the original 3 AoE counterattack champions, the most recent being the mythical, alas, the Sunbearer. Aside from that, she does have the A1 that can attack an enemy 2 times, and it will decrease their turn meter by 10% on each hit if they have any buffs, which of course synergizes with the counterattack on the A2. And of course, we've probably all experienced it in the arena, but Valkyrie's passive will push enemy turn meter back every time they receive a buff, and will also fill her turn meter by 10% every time the enemy receives a buff. Granted, the latter part of this, where she can push turn meter back, does require accuracy, so you can resist that effect, but just by buffing, you will always be pushing her turn meter forward, which will ultimately lead to her cutting in and placing the big shield and the counterattack buff. In terms of the build, this is a very specific build for the purposes of Demon Lord and Clan Boss, and we'll take a look at that team in a bit here, but I have her built in a Guardian set with resilience. So as we saw on her A2, the shield that she places is proportional to her defense, so naturally we want her to have as high as defense as possible, but also because this is a Demon Lord speed tuned team, we do need her to be a particular speed to make the team function. So if we take a look at all of the gear pieces, you'll notice a trend that we're trying to maximize the amount of defense on her, just to maximize the size of the shield. So defense on the banner with speed and defense as the sub roles, defense on the amulet. Doesn't really care about the rest of the substats. We're just looking for defense on the ring. Defense ring, triple roll on defense with some HP, a little bit of survivability. For the boots, we have speed on the boots with accuracy, defense, and defense. We have defense on the chest with some speed, and then we have defense on the gloves. You're sensing the pattern here. Defense, defense, defense as much as possible, and you'll see that in the total stats. The shield, a little bit of defense, but mostly just making sure that she's the appropriate speed. And then here's the helmet, where we have a little bit of defense as well, some speed, and then speed accuracy. You can't have defense on the weapon, of course. So all of that corresponds to her having over 7,000 defense, 7,300 to be exact, whilst also still maintaining 5,200 or 52,000 on the HP. The speed required for the speed tuned team is 251, so that is exactly where she sits. And then we don't really care about her accuracy or resistance. We just want her to have the right speed for the job and as high as defense as possible. For the blessing on her, I did opt to go with Phantom Touch. That's because for hard mode Fire Knight, she is the counterattack champion, and thus she can have a chance to place extra hits into the shield, which just makes it a little bit easier to get the shield down. And then for the masteries, these are optimized for Demon Lord Clan Boss. Again, that is her primary role on my account. Offense and defense tree. The offense tree, we're pretty much hugging the left-hand side, coming all the way down to War Master for the extra damage. And the defense tree, we're picking up as much defensive tankiness stats as we possibly can, and then making sure to come all the way down to deterrence, because specifically in Demon Lord Clan Boss, whenever he stuns, you have a chance to counterattack, which can lead to more damage from the A1, but also a chance for more War Master hits, which is more damage. So now let's talk about the couple of areas that I actively use my Valkyrie, starting off with the grand reveal of my new Demon Lord Clan Boss team, at least on the channel. I've been running it for a few weeks now, but we have what is called the Mashald White Whale composition. If you want to look it up on Deadwood Jedi, I'll have a link to the speed tune in the description box down below, but it is this team here. We have Valkyrie, we have a Doom Priest, we have a Iron Brago, we have Mashald, and then we have a DPS, in this case Suai Firstborn. And in fact, we're actually going to be running this version of it. There's 2 different versions because of the required delays in order to make the composition work. You'll note that there is no block debuffs, but since we have Doom Priest in the squad, it is affinity friendly. But before it gets into sync, the first few turns, it matters a little bit to have the decreased speed on the team. So there's a little bit of a difference in the start relative to the Spirit team versus the non-Spirit team. But this is a non-Spirit, so let's go ahead and quick battle this on Force Affinity. My guess is that it's going to be somewhere around 100 and something million, which is plenty. All you need to do is around 70 million damage, so 120 million there. So let me break down quickly how this team functions. It is a 2-to-1 speed ratio comp, and that is primarily enabled by Mashald because he does have that 2-turn, or he has the increased speed on all allies effectively on a 2-turn cooldown because of the extra turn ability survivability in his kit. So we're always under increased speed the entirety of the time. So that keeps us, or eventually gets us in sync with the 2-to-1 speed ratio relative to the clan boss. Doom Priest, like I mentioned, is in there for affinity friendliness, so she can cleanse all the debuffs in decreased speed, decreased attack, decreased accuracy, all that stuff, but also the stun as well. She is first in the turn order, so that is what allows that to happen. Iron Brago is very, very important. One, you can tell that he is the primary DPS for the squad, 41 million damage, carrying the brunt of it for the squad, but he also brings increased defense on a 3-turn cooldown for a 3-turn duration. So on top of always being under increased speed, we're also always under increased defense, which of course increases the size of Valkyrie shield, making us a lot more survivable. In addition to Michelle being the primary speed function champion, who's also one of our DPSs on the squad, you can see there 28 million. Valkyrie putting up decent numbers, which might surprise you, but since she has such high defense, every time she might crit here and there, it's just going to do a pretty decent amount of damage over the course of the long fight. And of course, everyone on the team is going to be counterattacking the entire time. And then lastly, we have Sawai Firstborn in there, who's basically just the DPS slot. I wanted someone who can have decreased attack as well as decreased defense and weaken in their kit, and she happens to be the perfect champion. But I also wanted them to not be Spirit Affinity, just so that we have a chance in case there's 3% resists or weak hits, particularly on Magic Affinity for Iron Brago, that we don't die to not placing decreased attack. So there's a bit of redundancy between them to have decreased attack on the squad, but also Sawai happens to bring decreased defense on the A1 and weaken on her A3. And so she's rounding up the trifecta of pure DPS here on the squad with 29 million. Now, because I am in the end game, I did build this team to be a little bit more aggressive than I would have done if this was years ago. So everyone's not in like stalwart as you'd expect for like a traditional clan boss team where you're trying to survive for as long as possible. I built them to kind of do as much damage as possible before they eventually succumb to the damage from the clan boss. And so there's a nice happy medium of doing enough damage to get the 1 key, but not trying to push it to like 300 million damage or something crazy just by going all out survivability. So Iron Brago is built for damage, obviously Mashald is built for damage, and then Sawai is built for damage as well. And there's also a lot of potential to grow here when it comes to blessings. As you can see here, the highest on the squad is only 3-star, and that's on Doom Priest, who's obviously not the most important champion to have a blessing on in the squad. So if I could slowly but surely get Sawai up to 5-star, 6-star, that could be a lot of extra damage from Phantom Touch as well as the extra stats. Same thing for Iron Brago and Mashald, getting them up to 4-star would give them extra attack and or defense, and most importantly crit damage. And then for Valkyrie, getting her to 3-star would give her more defense, bigger shield, etc. So now let me answer the question that a lot of people have been asking, which is why was Valkyrie my most wanted legendary on my account? And it was because I'd always had eyes to build this type of team. I prefer to run traditional clan boss teams. I mean, traditional teams in general across the game, but particularly in Demon Lord Clan Boss. No disrespect to unkillable teams, I just find it to be a little bit less fun, less challenging to do. So I've always wanted to run a traditional team. But more importantly, because they added the aspect of auto battling, my old team, which was also traditional, it had to have manual starts every single time. And so I still had to run my keys on manual and watch it run, just like, you know, the olden days. But this team, as you can see here, is full auto. And so that was something that was desirable to me. And so it's just a massive time savings every single day. So I don't have to wait the 20-30 minutes to wait for the normal 1 key to run. I can just do it instantly, just like everyone else, but still have a traditional team. And then of course, the second area where I planned to use Valkyrie was hard mode Fire Knight stage 10. So we have here a pretty bare bones team, a counterattack ally attack team, meaning that we let the Fire Knight take a turn once we get to wave 3. He hits into the counterattack, we all counterattack, everyone hits with their A1s, and then we follow up with the ally attack from our ally attack champion, break the shield, and then commence the boss killing from there. So alongside that duo, we do have Newt and Crowd in the Blue, so we have 2 sources of freeze as well as our primary DPS with the enemy max HP. And then we have Tomb Lord in the squad, one to help us kill the waves with the poisons and the damage, but also to be our primary debuffer for the boss with decreased attack and decreased defense. And then of course a triple hitter on the A1 with decreased speed to slow down the boss. Let's go ahead and see this team in action. I believe it takes upwards of 4 minutes. It kind of depends on RNG, and this team is by no means perfect. So we'll kind of see if we get a good RNG run or a bad RNG run. And I'll let you guys know, or I'll let you guys decide in the comments down below whether or not I actually run this team for the long haul, just because I prefer my dungeons to be closer to the 3-minute mark. Fire Knight being the one exception, I allow it to kind of drift closer to 4 just because of the nature of the fight, where you have to keep the shield down and you have to, that limits the amount of damage you can do, because a lot of your team is built around breaking the shield and keeping it down versus just bursting him once the shield is down. But I digress. So a little touch on the AI overrides for the squad. Opener don't use on Tomb Lord's debuffing ability. Newt is allowed to use Blessed Bash on the waves, doesn't really matter, except for wave 2, I believe I turned it off. But most importantly, we do want the AoE damage from Newt just so he can help us kill the waves. Crowdin is built a little bit for damage. He has crit rate on the gauntlets, so he's helping us do a little bit damage for the waves. And then he's prioritizing, or he has opener don't use, excuse me, on the AoE freeze, so they have it ready to go when we start on wave 2. Then you might have noticed there from Mikage, she stays in form 1 on wave 1, but on form 2, I change her over into the alt form so that she can bait out the reheal passive by placing the weaken, and then it allows for the debuffing from Crowdin and or Tomb Lord to land, and thus we don't have to worry about her cleansing everyone. That's the main concern when you're dealing with the hard mode Fire Knight 10 waves, is the reheal Bone Spirit cleansing and healing everybody by a ton, given all the debuffs that you're probably going to put out along the squad. So we're making pretty quick work here, 90 seconds in so far, and you can kind of see that it's not fast. I don't have one of those teams where, you know, we're just like one-shotting the waves with a super power 6-star awakened crushing Ren champion or something like that. Maybe that's something I can work towards in the future, but for now it's kind of just a slow and roll poison and then a little bit of AoE damage, but just under 2 minutes to get to the boss. And here is where things start to matter. So everyone starts off with their A1s. Doesn't really matter here. These are kind of dead hits into the shield, but I do think you take a little bit less damage. And then we have the counterattack from Valkyrie coming up, and then the boss takes his turn, gives us the big smack there. Everyone counterattacks, so you can see we're at 21 by the time we get all of our counterattacks in, with some variance because Phantom Touch is on some of these champions, as you might have noticed. We end up with around 8 to 9 hits depending on that. So we come in, Mikage changes forms, ally attack, and that should get rid of all the rest of the stacks. And most importantly, decreased speed has been placed while we broke the shield, and thus that opens the door for everyone to start doing their turn meter manipulation. And as you can see there, just because of the speed tune, we allowed Tomb Lord to come back in or start immediately with the decreased defense and decreased attack, so that if the boss happens to get a turn, which is possible, it is fair game, that can occur, then he will not kill us if he does get a turn, because notably we have decreased defense across the squad. No one's built with resistance or anything like that, so we could be susceptible to a big slam if we don't have decreased attack out there. You might notice the extra turns on Crowd in the blue there going ham, and he is in a relentless set to try and help RNG in our favor as far as increasing the amount of freezes that we're going to get out there and keep the turn meter of the boss reduced. So I guess this is a good RNG run where Cryoden went absolutely ballistic and just got a bunch of extra turns to place a lot of freezes to keep the turn meter down. But this team has certainly had many instances where the boss has gotten a turn, he slams us back, but between the counterattack that's that is up there most of the time, one between Mikage extending it and then Valkyrie just placing it, and the ally attack from Mikage herself, we are easily able to break the shield again and then continue on. But of course we don't have heal reduction on the squad, so it does take a little bit more time. So there you go, just under 4 minutes to complete the run. So again, let me know in the comment section down below what you would do in my position, because like I said, I prefer my dungeons to be under 3 minutes, and my stage 6 hard mode team, which is essentially the exact same except the Valkyrie's not there and we do have another ally attacker in the mix, because the boss is a lot slower and it's a lot easier to keep his turn meter suppressed with a double ally attack team. That team on stage 6 takes between like 2.5 and 3.5 minutes depending on RNG of the Blessed Bashes and whatnot, whereas this team takes anywhere between 3.5 minutes and 4.5 minutes, so it's about a minute slower on average, but I would be able to run stage 10 versus stage 6. Obviously the gear quality is a factor, and it's better gear quality to run stage 10, but at the same time I also value time a lot of the times, and so I want to run the quicker run if I can. But let me know your thoughts. Would you rather go for the highest gear quality, sacrificing a little bit of time, or save a little bit of time and get a similar level of gear quality? So in terms of the other areas where Valkyrie could be used, I don't really see her doing much in like most of the dungeons in the game. I think she could be kind of helpful in like Iron Twins teams. I've seen her run with like a Stag Knight or a Tomb Lord to place, or people who have A1 decreased speed, she can work with that because he obviously doesn't break through shields or anything like that. You get free hits onto him, and of course the shield is just just protection from the damage. But other than that, I don't think she fits into many of the dungeon teams outside of Fire Knight, of course, for the counterattacking into the shield. Faction Wars, of course, she's going to be useful. Not the fastest champion, but she can be a little bit of a protection. But Barbarians is quite easy to do, especially after you get Scylla Drakes, who's just a powerhouse with the stun and the revive. And you're basically good to go once you combine Scylla Drakes with some DPS. She's definitely outside of the current arena meta, but every once in a while you do see a Valkyrie pop up there again, just kind of using the turn meter boosting passive and or turn meter decreasing passive, depending on how you want to look at it. She's one of those champions who I always describe as like, she's better as like an enemy combatant in waves, where it's very annoying and you have to deal with her specifically and come up with ways to counter her. You don't want to buff against enemy waves of Valkyries and stuff like that, or you want to have buff strip, etc. So she definitely gives off that kind of vibe to me, where she's more tuned for enemy waves and whatnot. Speaking of enemy waves, Team Tower. But then Curse City, she did come in handy a little bit on the last rotation, just because I threw her into a team that was like Spirit Affinity something or other, and she just offered a little bit of extra protection with the shield. The counterattack was a nice bonus, but mainly it's just the shield shielding us from taking damage from the enemy combatants. So there you have it. That is my showcase for Valkyrie in all of her glory, and she has been finally dethroned as the most wanted non-void legendary on my account, to be replaced by the old #1 way back in the day, which is a poison exploder between Xavia or Eleanor. Hopefully we can get those sometime in the future. It's been 4 years, we're still hoping, but hopefully that might happen in the future, and then we could do a showcase on one of them, building an old classic poison explosion composition for some dungeons. That would be super fun. One thing I forgot to mention for the clan boss team that I showcased is that it's not a perfect one key across all affinities. As you might guess, for a triple spirit composition, magic affinity can be a little bit on the weaker side with all the weak hits. I want to say majority of the time it does get above the 70 million damage threshold, but every once in a while there's a bad RNG run where it's around 66 million, so it's a little bit shy. And so that's what I meant by the effects of my team being a little bit more aggressive versus survivability. So a few members of the squad are a lot squishier than I would like for this particular composition, but as I mentioned, my plan to combat that is just to use awakening levels to compensate for that deficiency, versus trying to make my builds on like Suai Firstborn as well as Mashald a little bit more tanky. Everyone else is relatively tanky comparatively speaking, but the attack-based nukers could be a lot more tanky, but I wanted them to do the most damage as possible, because for me, if I can get all my teams to do around, let's say, 75 million worst case, then I'm kind of good. I don't really need to go beyond that. I just want the floor to be above 70 million across all affinities. So yeah, that's it for the Valkyrie showcase, and stay tuned because Ramontu was the latest winner of the poll on my community tab page, so Ramontu's guide or showcase will be coming up here soon in the near term. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And if you're enjoying the content on this channel, then feel free to hit that subscribe button down below as well for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.